evening. Great to have you with us again this week as we continue our Bible studies, and we're so encouraged that we're hearing so many good things from so many of you, and we really value all the comments that you're sending us, the appreciation for the thoughts and studies that we're bringing to you on our midweek transmission. This evening, our how-to is
how to honour God. Now, before we can honour God, we need to know what exactly does honour mean. And when you honour someone, you show them the highest respect and you esteem them. So you'll often read about maybe kings and queens when they honoured somebody. They would make a public demonstration. They would bestow gifts upon that person. They would give that person a title. They would let everybody know how honoured and valued that person was, how much respect they had and how much esteem they had for whatever that person had done. So to honour God, we must show respect. We must esteem him. We must give him that highest place. And it's not necessarily a private thing. It's something that everybody should know, that God is on the throne in our lives.
So to honour someone is to give them that place of importance in whatever area we honour them. We have an interesting Bible thought tonight for you as we give you a context for this, and we're looking at Genesis chapter 4. As we read Genesis chapter 4, we read about Cain and Abel. We're told that Adam and Eve, the Bible tells us, were the first man and woman, had children, Cain and Abel. And it came about in the course of time that Cain brought an offering to the Lord of the fruit of the ground. Abel, on his part, also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and for his offering, but for Cain and for his offering he had no regard. So we're told Cain became very angry. And we know, if you read that story and continue in Genesis, that Cain got so upset that his offering hadn't been honoured that he actually killed his brother out of anger and jealousy, the first murder. And that sets our scene. But when you read this verse, it doesn't automatically become apparent why God honoured Abel or Abel's offering and didn't offer Cain or honour Cain's offering. And the Lord says to Cain, if you do well, won't your countenance, in other words, won't your, the way you look, the way you feel, won't that be lifted? And if you don't do well, sin is crouching at the door and its desire is for you, but you must master it. But the question is this: what was it that Abel did that honoured God and caused God to accept the offering? And what is it that Cain did that didn't honour God? Because they both brought offerings. They both brought offerings from their labour. What I see in this verse, simply put, is that Abel brought from the first fruits. In other words, the very first things he got, he put them aside and said, God, you're the most important thing in my life. And so out of the first things I've got, I'm going to come and give them to you to thank you. Whereas Abel just brought some. It doesn't say he took the very first fruit from the ground, from the labour of his effort growing crops. It says he just brought some of it. And so what I see is that there are two principles that we can discuss tonight. One is that we honour God with what we have, and both Cain and Abel were trying to honour God with what they had. And it's important that we honour God with what we have. After all, God gives us everything we have. The second principle is that we must honour God with who we are. And that's where we see the difference between Cain and Abel. It's not just about honouring God with our possessions and saying nice things about God. Lip service, the Bible calls it. But actually, it goes to what's in our hearts. It goes to what's at the very depth of our being.
So it's not just a case of giving to God. Anyone can do that. But Cain gave out what he had spare, what he might not necessarily have needed, whereas Abel gave of the very first of what came in as a harvest for him. And it's that attitude that God comes first, and honouring God comes first, giving to God comes first. Before my own needs, I give to God.
And so I want to be really clear as we begin. This is not an excuse. You have to be honest with God. There's a lot of people who say, I can't afford to do this for God, I can't afford to do that. But actually they're spending an awful lot on wasteful things. And we need to be responsible with what God gives us. Because what God gives us, he gives us enough for us to be able to give back to him, to honour him. I'm talking about our time, I'm talking about our talents, and I'm talking about our possessions. So there's no way that any of us can say, I can't honour God because I don't have.
Because we all have time, and we all have abilities.
We all have something. Jesus highlighted the fact that the widow came and she brought an offering to the temple. And he said, well, you see this rich man? And he goes and he puts in his lavish gift and everybody can see him bringing his big gift. But the widow sneaks in quietly and she just comes and she puts, the word in the Bible is mite, which is a small amount of money, a very tiny amount of currency. And so out of her poverty, she gives a very little. But what Jesus points out is, it's not the scale of what she gives, but it's the scale of what it has cost her to give it.
Yeah, it's likened to the Cain and Abel again, that the rich man gives of what he's got spare, and obviously he's got lots spare, whereas the widow gives all that she's got.
Huge difference, and that's what honouring God looks like sometimes, is recognising that whatever I give to God, I have to give him because I want to honour him, not because I want to make myself feel good that I've ticked a box. So they tell me that in America, statistically, America in dollar terms, in monetary value, gives more in charitable aid than many countries. Certainly they're a huge country and they give. Charitably, there's a huge Christian population in America. But I understand that as a percentage of average income for the nation, it's not very much at all. So by comparison, in the UK, we give a lot less in money value because there are far fewer people in the UK, only 60 odd million people. But as a percentage of the average income that a person has, the UK, apparently, according to statistics, gives far more. And so sometimes it's not about how much we give, but how much what we give is of value to us. And if it doesn't cost us much, if it's not worth much to us, then it isn't worth much in terms of honour either, is it? Because anyone can give out of what they've got spare. So let's look at these first three halves. What I have, I can be very busy in my life, but I can still find time. I can still make time. We don't actually make time, we make space in our schedule, but we can make time. And when I'm busy, making time for God is of great value. Because if I've got lots to do, there are lots of things that require my time. If I'm a busy person, work, have lots to attend to, then giving God my time can be quite a challenge. Finding that time to give to him. Because we're talking about giving to God. There are times when we look at what we have and we say, well, I can't afford to give to God. I can't afford to honour God. I remember when we were first married and much younger with a young family, there was no such thing as working families tax credit. There were no subsidies for working people. I was working full time There was no minimum wage. My employer wasn't paying what I could call a good wage. He was paying a wage, but it wasn't a good wage. It certainly didn't allow us to live as a family well. And I remember saying to God, well, God, I want to give to you. I want to give you out of my finances, but I can't afford to. And I remember God saying to me, but you have time. Give me your time. And I began to do that, to give God my time. Where I could, after work, spend time with the family, but I would give God my time. And I found that I was able to honour God with what I had, rather than feeling guilty about trying to honour God with what I didn't have. I'm not talking about when I waste all my time sitting down watching videos on YouTube or scrolling through Facebook all day or running after the family and filling my day with this, that and the other. I'm talking about when genuinely I have to do things. I have to be in a place of work and I have to be there from this hour till that hour. I have to spend hours at home preparing my reports and I have to do it because that work has to be done. Then finding time for God becomes something that is valuable. It's of worth to me because it costs me to give up my time for God. And so I give up my time for God because I want to honour him. Not because I feel a guilty obligation, but because I want to honour God. We often hear people say there are never enough hours in the day.
And all those people who were retired and said they don't know how they have enough time to go to work in the first place.
Yeah, and you realise that it's so easy to fill our time.
Yeah.
So sometimes honouring God isn't just about giving God some of our time or giving God part of our time when we're so busy. It's about managing our time.
Yeah, and lockdown has proved to all of us just how much time we spent doing things we really didn't need to do because we've survived quite happily without them for the last 14 weeks.
It's amazing how much time we waste as a society. We've grown into this idea of having leisure time, and me time has become a phrase. From the 90s to the 21st century, we've had this thought of me time. And we've had friends who used to have magazine days. I have to have an afternoon where I just sit and read magazines. And fair enough, if that's what makes you happy. But as Charis said last week, there are things that are okay. And then there are things that are
good.
Really good.
Yeah.
And so we can fill our time with things that are okay. But isn't it better to honour God with our time and do things that are really good?
Because see, when I'm making the time to find time with God and to honour him, he renews my strength. It says, those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. It's vital that we honour God with our time, that we find that time to spend with him. And honouring God with our time isn't just finding time for us to spend with him on our own, building our relationship with him, but it's how we serve him in our communities too, how we serve him in our church and in the community in which we live. What are we doing for God with our time?
There's a principle in the Bible of tithing that's given a tenth. And whilst it's introduced by Abraham with Melchizedek in Genesis, you can read that account there in the Old Testament. It followed through all the way through to David and all through the Old Testament. He talks about this principle of taking a tenth of what we have and giving it to God to honour God. If we tithed our time, that's if we give God a tenth of our time every day, that's a minimum of 2.5 hours. So that's enough time to have a devotional, private, quiet time with God, to attend church services when church is back open, to do some voluntary work in the church and for the church, and do good work for God around our community.
Yeah.
2.5 hours a day. My goodness, you could do so much with that. If you gave God 2.5, if you gave God just the 2 hours and shortchanged him on the half hour, 2 hours a day spent in service for God is a phenomenal amount of time. just imagine what you could do.
How different would the places we live be if we spent 2 hours a day showing the love of God to people, showing His grace, demonstrating the kingdom of heaven in their lives?
How awesome would our church buildings be? How much better would they be cared for, painted, managed, grass cut, car parks attended, litter picked, all the necessary administration, all the jobs that go on behind the scenes, if the whole congregation were just given 2 hours a day. Wow.
In other religions, it's works that get you to heaven or get you your reward in paradise, and people who follow those religions where they're works based, they do so much, they put so much effort in. But as Christians, because we're faith based and it's grace and God's loving kindness that gets us salvation, we can be so lazy. You know, we really need to start honouring God and start having a bit more respect for what He's done for us and that price that He paid for us.
So when we talk about time, the next thing we've got to talk about when we talk about giving God time is our abilities, our talents. Because what am I going to do with my time? And what can I do? Well, there's lots I can do.
Yeah.
Everybody has a smile.
And smiles are infectious.
Yeah. I got to be honest. It's almost like a given that everybody makes a cup of tea. When we're able to meet, everybody makes a cup of tea in church. Some people aren't good at making tea. They'd be better putting their other talents to use. Other people make the most amazing tea or the most amazing cakes. They're talents. Just as much as somebody who can cut the grass or knows how to weed, somebody who knows how to use a paintbrush, somebody who knows how to type letters, somebody who knows how to organise a database, somebody who knows how to work a video camera, somebody who knows how to work a computer, somebody who knows how to... Well, God gave you abilities and talents.
And He made us all different. We can't have just a few people trying to do everything, because God equipped the whole church. Every member has got their part to play. For some, it might be sending a letter of encouragement to somebody or filling in forms on behalf of somebody. It could be baking a cake and taking it round to someone that you've not seen in a while, or you know is going through a hard time. It's not just about ministry and praying and preaching and all those things that you see at the front. It's about all the other stuff that goes on behind the scenes.
It's the body.
It's doing some cleaning for someone, maybe babysitting for someone, doing some shopping for somebody. There's so many things we can be doing to demonstrate the love of God to others. Picking up the phone and making a phone call, and we can all do that. There's some people that are so gifted with being able to chat and have happy and joyful conversations with people, and make use of that. See it as an ability and a talent that God has given you.
And one of the ways we can, and just touching on this tonight because time doesn't allow for us to expand all these things in great detail, but one of the things we do with our abilities, if we want to honour God, is we can develop our abilities. So just in the same way that we can either give God some of the time we have available, or we can make time, in other words, make space in our schedule for God, we can not only just give God what we're able to do, but we can then go and honour God by learning to do those things better. We can develop our abilities. So whether that's learning how to do something because we're able to do it, but wouldn't it be great if I could do it? So even working on this video camera during social isolation, I'm able to use a video camera. I could do it basically, but Charis can tell you, I spent a lot of time watching YouTube videos, reading articles on how to do a better job. And I know you probably sat there at home going, well, you didn't do a very good job. Well, fair enough, you know. But I've still sought to improve the limited talent that I have to be able to do a better job. And we can all do that. And it honours God when we take what we have. It's a bit like the parable of the talents.
Yeah.
We take what we have and we invest in it so it becomes more. Don't tell me you can't do, that you're not very good at. Because the fact is, if you honestly think you're not very good at, what you're saying is, I have an ability, but I'm too shy to use it. Well, use it. and learn how to develop it.
Yeah, and don't diminish what God has
No.
given you. Don't belittle what God has given
That's
to
right.
you. God gave it you for a reason, because he knew you were just the right person to use that ability. So God invested it in you, and he wants to see a return on his investment. Don't belittle what God has given.
No, step up. Step up. You know, there are those in our church who are able to help with technical things and sit behind the scenes doing the technical. There are those who actually, if they overcome their own shyness, are able to sit in front of a camera and tell a children's story, or able to share a testimony, or read a Bible reading. I've been really blessed and amazed at the quality of some of the Bible readings we've received and the way in which people have spoke very clearly. And so we're really encouraged by all that. And I just want to encourage you that you have abilities. You know, I love it when I see people going out and giving somebody a meal or a hope package. You know, when we go out on the homeless and we make sure they've got dignity packs and things like that. We've got people who are out on the streets doing that. Now, you might not have the gifts and the abilities to go and talk to the homeless and people with addictions and challenges. But I bet you'd be really good at backing someone up who's doing that and putting together hope packages, putting together resources behind the scenes. Everything helps. Because an hour that you spend preparing something for someone else to then take and spend an hour delivering is an hour less they have to spend preparing that. They can prepare something else.
And it's also such an encouragement too, that yes, somebody's supporting me, someone's got my back, someone's helping them.
And there are so many things we can do with our talents and our abilities. There are things that you do out there that we don't know, and we would love to hear, because we would love to get you involved in so many ways, because the church needs everybody. God didn't give us abilities so we could put them on a shelf. He gave us abilities so we could help each other and carry the work together. So that's our time, that's our abilities. And then, yes, the third thought on what we have is our possessions.
Yeah.
Honouring the Lord with what we have. You know, Moses was serving God, and he said, well, I don't have anything, God. And God said, what have you got in your hand? Moses had a staff. And, of course, the account in the Old Testament, in Exodus, tells us how God used that staff to bring about ministry and demonstrate his power to Moses and through Moses. And so I want to tell you that sometimes the things we possess, the things that are in our possession, God could use them for his glory if we want to honour him with our possessions so much. There are people who've got real talent of hospitality. They're really gifted in making people feel welcome and making them feel at home and helping them to settle into the church community, and it's a real gift. And then if they honour God with their possessions, their homes or their food, then there they are honouring God in just that additional way. So I want to encourage you that...
And honouring God with our car.
Yeah. I love it. We have friends who sometimes go to a Baptist church in Barry, and they're always just really taken with what that church does practically. And so they have a directory, a church directory, and in that church directory there's a list of people who've gladly given their names and their contact information and are offering. So, for example, there'll be someone on that list who says, if you want me to come and cook a meal for you, I'll come and cook a meal for you. Yeah.
If you need me to help your kids with their homework, then I help in these subjects and
someone
all
else,
sorts of things.
If you need a lift to the hospital, then I can give you a lift on these days. Or
if you need someone to sit with an elderly relative while you go and do something, then I'm free to do it. And
all these ways.
All these things that we might not even necessarily consider, yet it makes such a difference to someone else.
And so this practical help, both with our talents and abilities, but also then into what we have, our possessions. And yes, it does also include money. And I don't know why, but over the years, the Apostolic Church has just been so mean-minded about money. It's like, oh, you know, it's like money's a dirty word. But the truth is, God puts money in our pockets.
And he gives us bread to eat and seed to sow.
Yeah.
Not everything that God puts in my pocket is for me to spend on me and mine. Just because I spend it on children as well doesn't mean I'm giving it to God. It's because ultimately I'm giving money to my kids because it makes me feel good. So again,
Because you love them as well.
Yeah, but we love them, and yeah, it makes us feel good. But it's not honouring God that I'm doing that. I have to go beyond that.
It's honouring your family.
To honour God. So it's important that we give to God.
So God gives us enough for us to have bread. That's enough to provide for us and our families, to take care of that. But he also always with it gives us enough to have something to sow. We spoke about the widow's mite earlier, and the widow, she didn't have much, but she gave an awful lot out of an awful little. This principle of tithing, this principle of giving that the Bible presents, it comes from the heart of God. It's not meant to be a rule about, oh, you must give this much. Because for some people, God provides so much more abundance that tithing would be a bit of a cheap way of doing things. It wouldn't really be honouring God, it would just be obeying the rule. For others, tithing is a huge stretch. It's a huge challenge to have the finances to give that much. And God doesn't, as we've talked about in our own lives, God doesn't intend for us to be crippled in how we honour him and how we worship him. But this idea of worshipping him, honouring him with what we have, our possessions, what's in our control, and that does include our money. It's an important factor that God builds into our lives, and one in which I think he challenges us.
And we can also honour God in the way we spend our finances.
Yeah, so it's not always about just giving as in, oh right, I've got to give my tithe to the church. Not going buying copious amounts of alcohol for Christmas, not going buying copious amounts of cake and additives, not spending on unnecessary selfish indulgences, maybe putting some money in the homeless pot or in some other charity, doing good with what God gives us, making what we have, whether it's money, whether it's our car, our house, using everything we have in our possession to honour God, whether it's in the church and part of church activity or whether it's outside of the church. As Christians, we honour God all the time, not just in the bits that we choose to allocate as God's time. So how we conduct our lives, how we use our abilities, not just in church terms but in life terms, how we use our possessions. It's important that we honour God in all these ways.
And if you're struggling to, how can I honour God with this ability or with this possession, pray about it. I'm sure God will provide an answer or open a door for you to be able to use that in a ministry.
Well, that's about all we've got time for this evening. Next week we'll continue to look at this idea of honouring God. This week we've talked obviously about honouring God with what we have. But next week, God willing, we'll talk about honouring God with who we are. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week as we continue that. Before we go, just remember, we're praying for you. God's watching over you. We pray right now that God would keep you safe. Fill you with his joy and his peace. We'll see you soon.
Ta-da.
Goodbye.